Audio recording for this meeting has begun.
So again, good afternoon, good morning to everybody. Welcome to another NICR, National Institute for Congestion Reduction webinar. Before we hand the presentation over today to Beverly, what I want to do is tell you a little bit more about her before she gets started. So Dr. Beverly Kuhn is a senior research engineer at Texas A&M Transportation Institute with over 30 years of diverse and extensive experience in the conduct and delivery of cutting-edge research results in transportation operations. She has served as a project manager and principal investigator on numerous projects for NCHRP, FHWA, state agencies and local agencies in the support of broad range of topics related to transportation systems management and operations, active traffic management, managed lanes, and travel time reliability and regional operations. So with that, Beverly, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you, so take it away.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I appreciate the opportunity to share our research results with everyone. As you obviously can see by the slides, that today what I'm going to talk about is the result of our portion of a NICR project that looked at developing a decision matrix to identify proactive operational strategies to mitigate or delay congestion. The project objectives, which we started, I believe, about 1.5 years ago, were to develop a methodology to forecast congestion, whether it's recurrent or non-recurrent, using particularly real-time data and connected vehicle data in particular, because this is a new data stream that we are starting to utilize in operations and planning. And so that was one primary objective of the project. TTI had a specific role in helping provide resources to Qatar, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. The other portion of the project was to develop this decision matrix. There's a lot of operational strategies out there that agencies can deploy either in real time or in near real time to look at how do they mitigate congestion, whether it's recurrent or non-recurrent. And as the trick with TISMO strategies, which we're going to talk about, is can we try and get ahead of that congestion? So are there strategies that if we have the appropriate data, we can deploy them in advance of the congestion, or if we see the congestion is getting ready to start to affect operations, can we identify what might work to deploy immediately to try and mitigate that? This was a collaborative project between Qatar and TTI. And I'm going to give you some high-level overview of the different activities that we undertook and show the primary tools that were developed as part of the TTI portion of the project. So the project work plan involved looking at the data possibilities and the use of that data in the modeling and simulation that Qatar was working on, and then developing a literature review to look at what are the proactive congestion management strategies and how does data fit into managing congestion and deploying these strategies, and also in simulation and modeling. We developed a number of recommended strategies that fit within those scenarios, and then developed a decision matrix and an online tool that agencies can use to look at what is possible for their community based on the kinds of data that they have and the objectives that they're trying to achieve with operations. The first activity in this collaborative effort was to identify data that could be used by Qatar in their modeling and simulation activities that is different than the data that they had from Florida, and to prepare and deliver that data to them. The TTI team identified some data sources from Houston, Texas, through our Houston Transtar and our connections with Tex.TMC that functions in Houston. And then also we have some robust data sets from Bell County, Texas. What this is it's a long corridor along I-35 that's been under reconstruction for a number of years, and we have a lot of robust data that's coming into the TMC that we were able to prepare and provide to Qatar in order for them to use it in their modeling and simulation activities. So we prepared the data sets working with Florida to identify what was possible and what was going to be compatible with what they were doing with their Florida-based data. So some of the variables that we looked at were the number of lanes in the cross section, what kind of median was there, what was the free flow speed according to the highway capacity manual, AEDT, and other functions, just to determine what data sets would work for what they were trying to accomplish. We have reams and reams and reams of data, and we wanted to make sure that we gave them data that was compatible, that would match pretty well with what they were trying to accomplish, so that they were using apples and apples and not apples and oranges. So the TTI team pulled the data sets, were able to clean them up, prepare them, and then we provided them to Qatar for them to use in their algorithm and simulation activities. We then moved on to our portion of our literature review, focusing on recurring and non-recurring congestion, and what are the data elements that could be used by an operational agency to enhance their monitoring and determine what might be able to use for proactive congestion management strategies. Most of the strategies that are out there today that involved field data are pretty straightforward. One of the things that we started to look at, which really kind of was relative to the modeling, the screening tool that we're going to provide, is what are those more advanced data feeds that we have access to? The safety message coming from connected vehicles, similar data that might be coming from automated vehicles as they start to enter the traffic stream, radar data, and how do we fuse all of that data? And will an agency, if they have that data available, be able to enhance their operations with these proactive strategies? So we put together a literature review that identified some of the critical elements and issues related to those data streams and how they feed into congestion management. The research team then went through and put together a list of operational strategies that an agency could utilize in order to enhance their operations and address congestion in their community. These all fall under the Transportation Systems Management and Operation, or TSMO, approach to congestion management. Some of these are more proactive and more specific to particular users, and also many of them involve real-time operations or adaptive operations, so that as the congestion conditions change on a facility, an agency can adapt those strategies according to what's coming, what they're seeing. Some of the ones that are listed here also fall under what's considered active traffic management. This is a scenario of different operational strategies that has emerged over the last 10 to 15 years, some of which are in operation in a variety of places across the country. Some of the more the ATM related strategies are things like part-time shoulder use, queue warning, adaptive ramp metering, dynamic merge control, and then dynamic lane reversal, and then a number of these are ones that have been in use for many years: toll express lanes, HOV lanes, hot lanes, transit ways. Now, what's interesting about these strategies that I want to point out is not all of them require real-time data streams. An agency may determine that they have HOV lanes and they operate all the time during peak hours, or have very specific operations. Some of these don't require, some require payment, the value-priced express toll lanes, or hot lanes, which are usually involve additional toll for single occupant vehicles. Some of these are really just specific to just overall operations. Adaptive ramp metering is nothing really new, but and queue warning can takes on many forms and is probably in the United States most typically utilized in work zones. I think that's another function that we have had a lot of experience in Texas with queue warning with respect to work zones. Dynamic lane reversals, some of those are city street related, but they also might be for your typical contraflow lanes, which are still in operation in a variety of places. Frequently, say, for a bridge or a tunnel where you have limited capacity and you have a very specific bidirectional peak period flow and you want to provide capacity during the peak period. And then dynamic lane use control, that's we use that all over the country, especially with respect to lane control signals when you're providing information about closed lanes or having different types of operational strategies. But not all of these strategies require real-time data. But what we were trying to focus on in this study is we have all of these tools in our toolbox. The more information we have about what's going on our facilities and what data streams are coming in from those facilities, the better we can apply these strategies in real time, near real time, or proactive if we have the capability to work to reduce congestion or potentially delay the onset of congestion if we can deploy them in real time or as quickly as we realize what is going on the facility. So these are the strategies that are included in our framework that I'm going to step through in a few moments. The decision matrix was the next step in our project. Once we identified what the operational strategies were that we wanted in our toolbox, we put together a spreadsheet tool that we will provide as a product for this project that allows IOOs to it gives them an option to select different strategies based on what their mobility goals and objectives are for their region. And then it also feeds their potential operational strategies. It allows them to choose what strategies that they might want to deploy or already have in their toolbox in order to achieve those mobility goals and objectives. And then we also provide key information for them to consider as they look at these strategies to determine whether or not they're appropriate and what are the things that they might want to factor in to their decision making. So what I'm going to do is give you an overview and walk you through the spreadsheet, which will be a tool. So I think Stephanie was going to give me an opportunity to share my screen. Let's see. All right. So hopefully you can see that. So there's a lot of different tabs in this spreadsheet, and what it actually does is it feeds our online tool. But it's difficult to process through all of this in a spreadsheet fashion, so we developed this interactive tool that will provide this kind of information in a more usable format. But I just wanted to show you all the different information that's included in this spreadsheet that helps the user look at the different considerations when they're looking at these active management strategies. As you can see here on the left, that's the list of all of the operational strategies that are included. It is not necessarily exhaustive of all TSMO strategies. There's a lot of work going on right now in the TSMO realm with FHWA, and there's probably upwards of 60 or 70 different TSMO strategies that can be utilized for operations, but we honed in on these specific ones. And the first tab provides information on specific active management goals. So across the top are the different operational goals that an agency might have. And as you can see, some of these, do we want to modify travel demand? Do we want to optimize any existing managed lanes that you might already have in operation? Optimize existing capacity. Do we want to provide additional facility capacity, say in a temporary scenario? Such as in temporary shoulder use, or increase mobility and accessibility by offering travel options. Some of the other strategies that are important or that are included are enhancing alternative modes, improving travel time reliability, and then also looking at things that are looking at environmental impacts. So those are the different goals that an agency might want to consider as they're looking at operational strategies. We then map the goals to more specific objectives. These are things like a goal might be provide a reliable alternative, and then we start to look at specific objectives such as increasing person carrying capacity, which would mean something that might provide priority operations to transit or HOV because you're trying to increase capacity. Goods carrying capacity increasing, that would be something that provides priority access or reliable trips for freight. And then also some of the other things, looking at their safety factors, safety objectives in here, reducing incidents, primary traffic crashes, reducing the severity of incidents, minimizing secondary crashes. So all the different objectives that we're looking at that get more specific about what we're trying to achieve. And then we just did a cross match of the strategies with the objectives to really start to narrow in on what potential strategies might be helpful. We then put together a matching of objectives and performance measures. As we all know, IOOs are, performance measurement, performance metrics are becoming more and more important for us to ensure that if we spend the resources to improve operations, how do we show that we have achieved what our objective is? And that's performance measures. So this performance measures here includes things like peak hour vehicle traffic, occupancy rates, bus ridership if you have a transit strategy, density for improved level of service, travel time, impacts to neighborhoods. So some of these are more esoteric in nature in terms that looking at transportation equity, consumption of fossil fuels if you're looking at environmental performance measures, noise levels, revenue generation if for some reason you're having tolling on your facility. So those are the different performance measures that are important when it comes to these strategies. And then we just kind of drill down a little more with the strategies versus the performance measures. Some of the other issues that we are including are enabling technologies. This is where the data starts to come in from the literature review. There's a lot of technology out there that agencies use to feed their TMCs and their operations. And it's not necessarily just for a state DOT. What we're seeing with a lot of these strategies is that local agencies are implementing them as well in very specific applications. So we're looking at what are the data feeds, the different types of infrastructure and technologies that can help with these operations. We divided them into 3 categories: infrastructure, systems, and data. And if you see on here on the data, I'm going to zoom in a little and this comes in. This is where a lot of this connected vehicle data, the real-time data that is starting to emerge, becomes important to allow agencies to use that data to operate their facilities. We then provide information based on cost. This information is at a pretty high level, just kind of a basic high, medium, or low. What we also provide for is things like what are the elements that that might drive costs. We're looking at core elements, so those are the things that what is already in place. Do you already have lane control signals in your facility? Do you already have HOV lanes? What are the things that really need to be into place for core elements for some of these strategies to be effective for you to actually deploy them? We then provide information on operational costs. Things like, for instance, if you have hot lanes, do you have barriers that separate them? Do you have signal systems? What's the cost to operate those elements when it comes to your hot lane? And then we also have things with provide information on maintenance. That's a continuing issue with these types of strategies. We need to make sure that an agency recognizes what's going to take to maintain the system once you put it into place. The importance is understanding what those costs are and how can an IOO build them into their budget. Is it something that they're going to work with, say, a typical maintenance budget? Do they have an operations TISMO budget? That is an emerging trend in agencies to say, we need to actually build this into our annual budget so that we know that when we need equipment replaced, we don't have to go and rob some other budget within our overall organization to make that happen. So those are different cost elements that we provide. We also look at applicable geography. Is this a freeway only type of facility or operational strategy? Or can it be at an intersection level or on arterial? So those are the things that we also provide. And then we also provide some information about compatible strategies. The reason this is really in here is that it helps an agency understand you can have, if you already have the equipment in place to deploy some of these strategies, such as dynamic speed limits, that technology and that operational strategy can also support, say, a hot lane. So a lot of this information is already out there. You may, or say you already have a hot lane in operation, you might be able to deploy part-time shoulder use or dynamic speed limits along with it, and you get some cost savings, or at least you can piggyback on that technology and the strategy to make that possible. And then we put in potential benefits. This ties in with the performance measures. What do we think some of the potential benefits are if you want to deploy these strategies? And then it gives you the opportunity to look at what those performance measures are, what the potential benefits are, and how do they match up with your overall objective that you see for the facility. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Go back to my slides. So that's all of the elements that are in the matrix. But as you can see, it's tab after tab after tab, and that can be a little cumbersome for someone to go through and really not necessarily be helpful. We want it to be helpful to the user. So we developed an online screening tool that takes all of this content and, at least in a pretty high level, provides information to the user so that they can kind of have a page and a picture of, if they want to go through the effort to look at, say, dynamic speed limits or a queue warning or something like that, what are the things they need to consider? So it basically puts on one page most of this content once they step through that. So I am going to step you through the screening tool. What it is it has a decision tree format, and it starts with selecting what kind of management objective are you trying to address. Do you have issues with crashes? Do you have issues with long travel times? Are you concerned with reducing peak period vehicle trips, increasing trip liability? What is it that you're trying to achieve in your corridor? And then it steps you through the different screens, and it's really quick and easy to go back and to kind of make different decisions to see what is the output and what are the things that might help you. So with that, Stephanie, if you can let me share my screen again. All right. So this is really just 2 questions that it asks, and because it's pretty simple to step through, you can go back and forth, you can print out information to see what is helpful to you. So in this example, let's say, I think with the example that we use is we want to increase, the first question is what active management objective do you want to investigate? Now we have it listed as active management because we're really trying to, because we are focusing on those more active operational strategies. So if we chose increased trip liability, these are all of the operational strategies, really almost all of them, can help with increasing trip reliability. But say I'm in a community where we might want to look at queue warning. So that is an issue. We've got some facilities or ramps where we have queues. We have work zones or anticipated work zones where we think queues are going to build. And so once we choose queue warning, these are the things that are provided by the tool, and one can just simply print these out and and take a look at all of that information to see what the possibilities are for Q warning. It lists all the goals, and you can see reliable alternative is there, what the anticipated benefits are. This could work on a freeway, an arterial interchange, or a ramp, so it lets you know that. And then the different types of enabling technologies that can enhance these operations, broken down by infrastructure, systems, and data. We talk about the different core elements with respect to costs and operations and maintenance. The costs would be minimal if you already have an existing field infrastructure like dynamic message signs and detection. If for a work zone application or other temporary Q warning application, the cost elements are going to would include temporary detection. So you need a portable signage. Those are the things you need to consider if it's going to be in a temporary scenario. From an operations perspective, there's information here. If it's implemented with some other strategy, then Q warning or flashing lights might need to be visible if you happen to have that. During normal operation, the signs are blank. The signage would be consistent and uniform to indicate congestion ahead. So this is just some tips and things to understand that it's at the medium level with respect to operational costs. And then we have maintenance, that if you use the maintenance costs are fairly low. If you have portable detection or messaging is used, you just need to make sure that your communication and operations work during work zone activity, but ongoing costs for maintenance are not really significant. And then we provide typical performance metrics. These are those benefits, the average daily traffic, change in operating speed. And if you wanted to go back and say, I want to look at a different strategy that meets this goal of increased trip reliability, say we want to do adaptive ramp metering, you're going to end up with different results. And then you could just print it out and have that information readily available. If you want to just start over and choose a different objective, then you can go in and say we want to reduce incident severity. So if you want to reduce incident severity, your operational strategy choices are considerably shorter. These are many of these are tied to speed, Q warning, as I said, adaptive ramp metering. So you can see in this scenario, there's a lot shorter list of strategies if you're trying to be very specific with that operational strategy. So it's very easy to use, and this is the live link, but and it's out there. We will also post it. It'll be included in our report, and we will have it available linked on a variety of places, and we'll share that information once everything is complete. And if you download the slides, then that hot link will be there and you can link to it. And then we're working on, this is the last portion of our project where we're disseminating the results. We're working on our final proposal, our final portion of the report. It's going to be a joint report between us and Qatar, and we're going to go into detail about our content, and we're going to deliver the screening the hot link to the screening tool, and then the matrix as a deliverable. And we're doing this webinar, and we'll be doing additional dissemination efforts through social media as we get through it. So that is all I had to share with you, and I'll stop there and entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Beverly. I will just bring up Beverly's contact information. Again, that information is also provided in that handout section of Adobe Connect. It's right above that Q&A box. So simply just highlight your mouse over the handout section, and that will save directly to the computer. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the NICR website after the Christmas holiday, New Year's holiday. So do stay on the lookout and sign up for upcoming webinars and our newsletter, and it will be posted there. Beverly, do you have a targeted, and we'll start with some questions, do you have a targeted date in terms of when the Excel spreadsheet will be available if somebody would like to use that process, and how they would be able to access it?
Actually, that is a great question. We're finalizing everything to deliver to NICR, to add a blank there, before the end of next week. We're like really just putting the finishing touches on that. One of the places that I will most likely, until I don't know at what point what the review process is for NICR to go through the tool and the report. Our portion of the report we're giving to Cutter this week as well, and so that will, I think some of this will be included in the report as just tables as an appendix, so that is kind of a clunky way to use the spreadsheet, but it will be included in there. As a side note, I am chair of the TRB Standing Committee on Freeway Operations, and we are going to put a link to the spreadsheet as well as to the screening tool on our website and make that publicly available from that mechanism until at some point, I don't know, I assume that NICR will have it available on their website. And I see another question. Did you have another question? But I saw one that's just popped up.
Yep,
in the Q&A.
I'll read that one up for you, Beverly. No, I didn't have any other questions. I will reiterate that, yes, once the report is finalized, it will be posted on the NICR website as well. So there's a couple questions here, so let's start with the first one. It says, any steps regarding applying the performance metrics to calculate benefit for a BC ratio?
That's a great question, Sarah. Thank you for asking it. For our tool, we didn't have that level of information, but I don't know if you're familiar with the TOPS benefit cost analysis tool that FHWA has available on their website. And I can provide a link to that. I can get that information to Stephanie if she would like to share it with the people that had registered for the webinar. It is a spreadsheet-based tool that you can download from their website, and it does allow you to do some benefit cost ratio assumptions or for different strategies. I am not sure at the top, off the top of my head, if all of our strategies are in that tool, but a number of them are. In fact, we use that screening tool, that tool, it's a spreadsheet, and there's also a document that goes with it. When we did a pilot study for variable speed limits in 3 locations in Texas, and it allowed us to do we did some data analysis based on the data that we collected from our deployment, and we were able to calculate a BC ratio. One of the things that I will say about that is when you're looking at benefit costs, if you can assume that you save on crashes, that is probably the #1 easiest way to justify any kind of operational strategy if you believe you can reduce a crash, especially one that involves injuries. I think that was one of the things that was really telling for us when we did that pilot study was even if you reduce one crash, it can pay for your operational, it can probably pay for your deployment very quickly. So as we're all working to achieve Vision Zero, that's one of the things I think that is really important for all of us is how can we reduce crashes, primary and secondary crashes? So that's a great question, Sarah. And I'll provide that link to that tool to Stephanie, so hopefully she can share it with everyone.
Thank you, Beverly.
And I see another question asked, do you want me to read it? I can read it.
I'll read it for you. It says, excellent informative presentation. I'm interested in TISMO strategies applied for arterials. Please briefly talk about the key points for arterials.
Great question, Pei-Sung. I appreciate that. Some of the strategies for arterials that are included in ours are it is a different animal when you're talking about arterials, but there are facilities where dynamic lane assignment is utilized, especially at intersections when you have movements that change. You might have movements that change depending on the type of the day because you might have queues that build at an arterial. There are some areas where depending on how you can have lane assignments where specific users are allowed to use a particular lane. For instance, maybe the curbside lane at the intersection is only for transit and turning vehicles. And one of the other things that has been used, we have this in a couple of places in Texas, where you have reversible flow during peak period. If you have an imbalance in peak period flow and you have available capacity, you might have a center lane go inbound in the morning and outbound in the afternoon. Those kinds of strategies are also utilized for planned special events. Here in College Station, Texas, on game day, we have an influx of 100,000 people that come into town, and it's very difficult to get them out of the general vicinity of the football stadium after the game if we were not going to use dynamic reversible lanes. So we might deploy the 5-lane arterial might be 4 lanes outbound after the game and 1 lane inbound, and a lot of that is done manually, but some of it is also done automatically with in some communities with lane assignments. So so those are some of the things that are looked for an arterial perspective. One thing I did want to bring up that we are starting to see that is becoming more and more important in the downtown urban area is curbside management, and also with respect to freight deliveries. So there are some areas that might be starting to experiment with lanes that are only for freight or shipping. So Amazon can get its trucks into delivery areas at certain times of the day, and so I think that is all starting to kind of evolve in terms of how we best utilize the arterial space over time throughout the day for the needed user. And then there's also a lot of discussion in terms of operation of the arterials and the whole Complete Streets initiative, with making sure that if you have pedestrians and bicyclists in the area and micromobility, so that we can ensure that everybody has mobility options, but you don't have you can improve safety and not have issues related to crashes involving pedestrians or bicyclists. That was really beyond the scope of this study, but it's where things are headed in terms of operations of arterials and those different TSMO strategies to make those things operate better in the downtown area or on arterial streets. Any other questions?
Beverly, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, but they do have your contact information, so if they think of something else,
yes, they do.
They can always reach out. And look, there's one more. The one just popped in. It says, any TSMO strategies for interstate route diversion to arterials due to freeway incidents?
That is another great question. That is typically, where you have route diversions or you have dynamic route assignments when you have incidents. One of the things that is very important with that is communication between the different entities that operate the facility. So traditionally, you might have the DOT operates the freeway and the municipality or a county operates the arterial streets. I think the best, a good rule of thumb is to make sure that you communicate, and so that if you're going to do a route diversion because of an incident, that the communication is there between the two entities, so that if the DOT reroutes somebody on traffic onto the arterial street system, they're not rerouting them to an arterial that's under construction and there's only 1 lane instead of 3. So I think that's probably the key point. But I think that it is a viable TSMO strategy. I think that sometimes there's hesitance for an agency to actually kick people, or not kick them off, but just to divert people off the interstate because they may not have control over where they go after that, and they may not. But I think that's just one of the things that good communication and good collaboration across agencies is really important. That's probably a key to that. But it is very important, because if you do have a major crash on an interstate and everybody has to get off, you want to make sure that you're not creating a bigger problem by putting everybody onto the arterial street system, and there's not the ability to mitigate that additional traffic. So if you have an incident, coordinate with the local agency, make sure that they can deal with if they need to have law enforcement out to guide vehicles through an intersection and override the signals so that you don't get these massive queues, because when you have those queues, you have the likelihood that you might have an accident or a crash in that queue because it's just unfamiliar scenarios. But that's a great question, and I would say communication between the two agencies is key to that being successful.
Okay, Beverly, both Sarah and Pei-Sung said thank you. I'm sure you saw that, but they did say thank you to both of their answering both of their questions. So it doesn't look like we have any additional questions, Beverly. I am going to open up the evaluation for everybody. Please take a few moments to complete that evaluation. And the feedback provided is very important to Beverly and the entire NICR webcast series. So on behalf of the National Institute for Congestion Reduction, thank you so much for attending today's webinar. And as I mentioned earlier, we will see you in 2022. And happy holidays, everybody. Thank you so much.